Hello and welcome to The Broken Sword. Today we are looking at what happened in Moria both before and after The Lord of the Rings.
Build me an army worthy of Mordor.
So before we dive into the mine of the video, I'd like to give a mention to Michael of the YouTube channel Nat1 Videos, as well as Benji of Benji's Hobbies. Michael has made us something incredible that links us to today's topic, and Benji has sent us something amazing to go with that too. But stay tuned until later in the video for the details on that. So now, let's dive down deep to where the drums echo. The Mines of Moria, also known as the Great Kingdom of Khazad-dûm, was an ancient underground realm of the Dwarves, and this was located under the Misty Mountains. It was known as the greatest kingdom of all of the houses of the Dwarves, and it was the original home of the first of Durin's folk. We have recently done a video on what happened to the Dwarves during and after The Lord of the Rings, but if you would like a more in-depth look at them before all of this, as well as having a look at their origins, then let me know that down in the comments below. But anyway, let's move on to what happened before the Fellowship entered the gates. The Mines of Moria, Khazad-dûm, the Black Chasm, the Black Pit, Casarondo, Hadhodrond, or even Dwarodalf. These are some of the names given to the ancient underground realm of the Dwarves. This realm was founded by Durin I, who also became known by the name of Durin the Deathless. This father of the line of the Longbeards had awoke under Mount Gundabad in the Misty Mountains during the Years of the Trees. From here he travelled south, alone, until he would eventually come upon the lake known as Mirrormere that would be located by the east gate of Khazad-dûm, which is the lake that Gimli took Frodo to look upon after the Fellowship had passed through the mines. We hear more of its discovery from the Appendix A section of The Lord of the Rings of Durin's folk. He slept alone until in the deeps of time and the awakening of that people he came to Azanul-Bizar, and in the caves above Khaled-Zaram in the east of the Misty Mountains he made his dwelling, where afterwards were the Mines of Moria renowned in song. There he lived so long that he was known far and wide as Durin the Deathless. Yet, in the end he died before the elder days had passed, and his tomb was in Khazad-dûm. It was that lake of Mirrormere that showed Durin the sign that it was here he should settle. For when he looked into the water, it appeared as though a crown of glittering stars shone above his head despite the sun being in the sky. It was also here, after Durin would finally pass on, that there would be a monument built to him called Durin's Stone. This stone would stand throughout the ages, albeit becoming more and more cracked and weather damaged by the time that the Fellowship would travel past it. Durin created this golden age for his house over his time. They continuously grew, and this realm was truly considered the greatest mansion of their entire race. They achieved many great architectural achievements here too. These would include the likes of the Second Hall, the Endless Stair, Durin's Tower and Durin's Bridge, which also went by the name of the Bridge of Khazad-dûm in later ages. It was not just in architecture they achieved great things though. After all, the Dwarves were considered the greatest of miners. So during these earlier years as well, they came across a new precious metal that they would name Mithril. Mithril would not be found anywhere else in Middle-earth except for in Númenor, meaning after its sinking it was truly the only place to find it. The discovery of this would be the catalyst for their increase in size and wealth, even after Durin I's eventual death, but that time had not come yet. As the years passed into the first age of Middle-earth, the Dwarves of Khazad-dûm managed to avoid being drawn into the wars of Beleriand, as Morgoth needed to focus his strength elsewhere. However, the Longbeards would still maintain contact with the outside world though, including the other of the Dwarven clans, and the men that would eventually arrive in the region of Rhovanion when they had come to settle there. There would be an alliance and trade deal struck up between these men and the Longbeards, with the Dwarves exchanging their high-quality crafted tools for food. This alliance would be one of the last achievements of Durin I's life, as he would soon finally reach the end of his time. After his passing, he would be buried in a tomb inside of Khazad-dûm. Now the years carry on and we move on to the second age of Middle-earth. Outside of Khazad-dûm, two of the other great kingdoms of the Dwarves, known as Nogrod and Belagos, that were in the Blue Mountains, were ruined. This would mean that the clans that lived there, being the Broadbeams and the Firebeards, would wander for a time without a home, until they finally made their way to Khazad-dûm. They would all come to live in this great kingdom. However, it is not actually known if they all merged to be considered one greater clan, or whether they all kept themselves separate like their original fathers. By the time of around the year 700 of the Second Age, the alliance between the dwarves and men had become stronger and stronger. The combined might of the heavy infantry of the dwarves along with the mounted archers of the men meant that they had the best strengths of both groups to fight off any attempts of invading orcs. Along with this alliance, they also established their initial relations with the elves nearby. It is widely considered that from this new relationship that the beauty of this realm greatly increased after this point. It was not just the beauty that increased though, but also the size of the realm. They had begun to expand further westward, all the way through the mountain until they could add the famous West Gate on that side, and this would sit on the border of Eregion. Even with this expansion though, the dwarves still tended to live in the eastern part of Moria. But as for why being on the border of Eregion was important is down to the Lord of Eregion, with that being Celebrimbor. This elf was one of the sons of Feanor and considered one of the greatest craftsmen of all time, and he struck up a great friendship with the dwarf named Narvi, as he was considered one of the greatest craftsmen of his race too. It was this pair that built the Western Gate, which explains the password of Melon, meaning friend in Sindarin, showing just why it was used for an entrance to a dwarven realm. It was also this gate that the Lady of Lorien, Galadriel, would use to pass through when going on to found Lothlorien. Khazad-dûm was made up of many levels that were connected by tunnels, chambers, and great pillared halls, and are described as having black walls, polished and smooth as glass. As the dwarves delved even deeper in their curiosity, they stumbled across tunnels that had not been dug by them. Instead, they were carved by unknown creatures that had existed since the earliest times in Arda, but the true identities of these beings is shrouded in mystery. We only appear to have one true sighting of one of these creatures, and that is when the Watcher in the water attacks the Fellowship outside of the Western Gate. The discovery of these creatures is what led to the building of other structures, for example, the Bridge of Khazad-dûm. It is described in the Fellowship as a slender bridge of stone without curb of rail that spanned the chasm with one curving spring of 50 feet. This bridge was built to perfectly suit the dwarves as a defensive system. Its narrow width with an enormous unknown drop either side meant that enemy soldiers would only be capable of passing over in a single file line, walking straight into the heavy infantry that the dwarves possessed. Again, we get to see this structure with the Fellowship as they make their journey through the mines, as this is the bridge that Gandalf breaks to stop the pursuit of the Balrog, then falling with it. As we move through the mines further, we would also come to the Endless Stair. It climbed from the lowest dungeon to the highest peak, as is described by Gandalf in the Two Towers, as ascending in unbroken spiral in many thousand steps, until it issued at last in Durin's Tower, carved in the living rock of Ziraxigil, the pinnacle of the Silvertine. These stairs are the one that Gandalf fought the Balrog up until they reached that pinnacle at the top. So here, at Durin's Tower, the highest peak of the realm, is where the epic duel between the Balrog of Moria and Gandalf the Grey took place. This fight was known as the Battle of the Peak, with Gandalf eventually striking down his foe after 3 days and 2 nights of fighting. After destroying Durin's Tower in the battle, with this leading to the blocking of the Endless Stair, the Balrog was finally cast down, breaking the mountainside as it fell, with Gandalf too passing from the stress that this battle took upon him. Although of course we know that he later returns as the more powerful Gandalf the White. But now back to Khazad-dûm itself. As the dwarves had grown in power and stature here, Sauron had developed a deep hatred for this place. As described in Durin's folk section of Appendix A, it says, "The power of Moria endured throughout the dark years and the dominion of Sauron. For though Eregion was destroyed and the gates of Moria were shut, the halls of Khazad-dûm were too deep and strong and filled with a people too numerous and valiant for Sauron to conquer from without. thus its wealth remained long unravished, though its people began to dwindle. Despite Sauron being aware the difficulty in attacking and the strength it would take to conquer this realm, that did not stop him from at least wishing to cause the dwarves as many problems as he could. Sauron would send a constant attack of orcs upon their gates, if for nothing more than to keep them from interfering elsewhere. As more years would come and go, the Rings of Power would be crafted into existence, and between the years 1500 and 1600 of the Second Age, these rings would be passed out to the members of the Elves, Dwarves, and Men. 7 of these rings were given to the Dwarf Lords, one of which was Durin III, who ruled over Khazad-dûm at this point. And also a fun fact here, the Elven ring Nenya, which was the one that was given to Galadriel, was in fact crafted with the use of mithril mined from Khazad-dûm. But anyway, as the Elven rings had not been tainted by the hand of Sauron, they became aware of his treachery and his creation of his own all-powerful Master Ring. This revelation is what started the first war against Sauron. This war broke out in 1693 of the Second Age, and as a result of this, Durin III's allies in the Iron Hills had now been cut off from them. After 4 years of war, Sauron had finally managed to conquer the land of Eregion, which remember is what lay on the border of Khazad-dûm. However, thanks to this realm and at this point friendship with the elves, they managed to help a great number of them escape these lands and travel through their tunnels through to the east of the Misty Mountains. Some of the more well known of these elves that did this included the likes of Elrond and Celeborn. As Eregion had now been overrun, it meant Durin's folk had to make a big call, and that was to permanently close their doors at the western side. This had a big effect on the inhabitants of this realm, as their numbers now began to dwindle from the great population that they once had, with a big portion of this also being thought to where they lost their support from the men in the Vales of Anduin to the east as well. Despite their lowering numbers, this did not stop the Dwarves of Khazad-dûm lending their support and taking a stand at the end of the Second Age. In the years 3434 through to 3441, the last alliance attacked Sauron, and with their help, after the siege of Barad-dûr and the Battle of Dagorlad, this alliance managed to bring down the Dark Lord. And so, the Third Age of Middle-earth comes to be. The Dwarves of Khazad-dûm continue to expand their treasures, hoarding more and more as time goes on. Their wealth still remains in the large stores of mithril that they were able to mine. However, their numbers would continue to be on the decline, which is something that likely came from dwarves becoming more interested in their mining than marrying and having children. This resulted in them digging deeper and deeper in the hope of discovering more hidden treasures. This mining eventually led to an issue though, and a big issue at that. For in the year 1980 of the Third Age, their digging disturbed something. Something terrible. Something that had slept for a long time. A great evil. A Balrog of Morgoth. This Balrog is the one that would come to duel with Gandalf the Grey, but before that time came, it would gain the nickname of Durin's Bane, for it slay the then king Durin the Sixth. But not just this. It would also wipe out vast numbers of the dwarves and their dwellings within this kingdom too. It was here that the survivors decided that they had to leave their once great home. So from here this realm was left empty, dark and eerie. The dwarves were too scared to risk waking up and disturbing that great evil once again. So from here, Khazad-dûm took up its newer name, Moria the Black Pit. It remained empty for a time until orcs from the Misty Mountains began to raid the abandoned areas. During these raids they discovered the Balrog and started to worship it as their leader. This led to these orcs taking up a permanent residence within the mines, and this in turn led to more evil beings of the likes of orcs and trolls being sent there to give them a new place to grow and multiply out of the eyes of their enemies. Of all of the orcs to live here, there was a chief amongst them named Azog, the Master of Moria, and although we see a version of this character in the Hobbit movies, the events for those movies were altered a fair amount from what actually happens with this orc. When we reach the year 2790 of the Third Age, the now heir of Khazad-dûm wants to try and reclaim it. This is the dwarf Thrall, who was king of Durin's folk for over 200 years and had led their people to the Lonely Mountain, where he also became king under the mountain. Thrall was warned against this idea, but it did not stop him, for he had fallen into great despair living in poverty the way that they had, along with the potential influence of the Ring of Power that he possessed too. However, he should have listened to those warnings, as when he entered Khazad-dûm, he was slain by Azog. This moment would lead to the beginning of the War of the Dwarves and Orcs, and this began in the year 2793 and lasted for the next 6 years. This war was a very damaging one for the Dwarven race, with them losing nearly half of all their warriors in the final battle. But despite this number of casualties, they still managed to come out victorious. Not learning from his father's mistakes though, the son of Thrall, Thrain, would also wish to reclaim Moria. However, the difference with him was he listened to advice. Dane Ironfoot would advise Thrain against this idea, for he was the one that killed Azog, and after doing so he looked through the gate of Khazad-dûm and witnessed that Durin's bane still lived on. Therefore, the mines continued to be under the control of the Orcs. And now there would be a short time of quiet within those halls, until the year 2989, when the dwarf once of Thorin's company, Balin, decided that it was once again time to try and reclaim the home of his ancestors. To start off with, this mission appeared as though it was going well, but it would turn sour fast. Only 5 years after they first arrived, it reached a point that this group of dwarves would become overwhelmed by the number of orcs that now lived here as well. And it is actually time for another fun fact here, as at a similar time to this, when the War of the Ring began to take shape, Sauron had made an offer to Dane Ironfoot, and it could have been considered a very tempting offer. Sauron offered Dane Khazad-dûm, along with the remaining Dwarven Rings of Power, of which he claimed to be in the possession of 3 of them, if he would give Sauron information about anything he may know about this one ring. Dane would refuse this offer though, and as a result of this, he would send none other than Gloin of Thorin's company and his son Gimli to Rivendell and the Council of Elrond, which in turn would lead to him joining the Fellowship of the Ring. But now, this is where we catch up to the events of The Lord of the Rings. As we know, the Fellowship enter through the West Gate after not being able to pass over the mountain. Gandalf battles the Balrog in the Battle of the Peak, and the rest of the Fellowship manage to escape into Lothlorien from there. So before we jump into the rest of the video of what happened here after the War of the Ring was over, it is time to talk about our collaboration for today's video. We have been lucky enough to work with Nat1 Videos again, like we previously did on the old channel with our Amon Hen video, which we really hope to get back up on this one at some point in the future too. But this time it's not just with Nat1 Videos, but also with Benji's hobbies as well. So before I give more information on that, you need to have a look at this.
Let them come. There is one dwarf yet in Moria who still draws breath.
So, as you can see, Michael of Nat1 Videos created this incredible Balin's Tomb set, and Benji painted us a set of the Fellowship to go with them. This has been a long time in the making, and the standard of everything we have been sent is just incredible. This miniature build was created for the purpose of tabletop gaming, and to be honest, it is so good it could work just as well as a display piece in its own right. The level of hard work into the details mean the closer that you look, the better it appears. And also, I would like to add, Michael has asked us to mention that he collaborated on the project with Shifting Lands, so a massive shout out to them too. Not just that though, as the standard of painting from Benji for the Fellowship miniatures to make this build complete is just awesome. Now all I ask for all of you is if you are interested in learning more about the build or the painting, both channels also have videos linked to this project, which of course I will link in the description below. Michael has one going through the entirety of the build project, and Benji has videos on the painting of the Fellowship, as well as the lore surrounding Middle-earth when it comes to strategy battle gaming. So please go and check them both out. But now, we jump back into Moria after the War of the Ring has reached its end. And well, there is nowhere near as much to note of what happened after as there was before, but I still think it is worth covering. we get some of the little information that we do know from the History of Middle-earth volume of Sauron Defeated, where it reads that Gimli has said, "Moria, I have no news. Maybe the foretelling about Durin is not for our time. Dark places still need a lot of cleaning up. I guess it will take a lot of trouble and daring deeds yet to root out the evil creatures from the halls of Moria, for there are certainly plenty of orcs left in such places. It is not likely that we shall ever get quite rid of them." So we can take from this that for the remaining time of the Third Age of Middle-earth, the mines of Moria remained populated by the evil creatures that survived the downfall of Sauron, so purely a realm of darkness at this point. Now as for any future attempts to retake and claim this kingdom once again, it would only ever be by the Dwarves. No other race would ever hold any interest in doing so themselves, but in fact there would only be one more attempt at it after Balin's attempt that would end with his falling with a final stand within the chamber of Mzabal, and this last attempt would not come for many years later, which of course means the details of it are far more scarce. What we do know is that it was led by the next and last reincarnation of Durin, with this one being Durin the Seventh, or Durin the Last. This Durin had in fact been prophesied about during the Battle of the Five Armies that we witnessed in the Hobbit story, and when he came about during the Fourth Age of Middle-earth, he was born with great desire and determination to return his line and race to their former glory, as well of course believing that Khazad-dûm was his birthright, being of the line of Durin. It is not known the exact time he finally orchestrated a retaking of this realm, except that it was after the year 171 of the Fourth Age. He led this final return to their ancestral city and was at the end of things successful. The dwarves of the line of Durin once again dwelt in these mines with no Balrog lying in sleep to be afraid of. The hammers once again rang out in their great halls for as long as anyone is aware of. In fact, it is said in the Peoples of Middle-earth volume of the History of Middle-earth collection that they remained here until the world grew old, and the dwarves failed, and the days of Durin's race were ended. Now sadly that is all we ever get on the history of this realm after the Lord of the Rings, but plenty goes on beforehand, so hopefully that makes up for it. And to be fair, we do not get an awful lot of information about much at all really going into the Fourth Age of Middle-earth, so this one's not really any different. But so there we have it, a look at the kingdom that was the most famous and awe-inspiring mansion of the dwarves in its prime. It is a shame that the more that time went on, it became a place of darkness and dread, although thankfully it would have been restored to at least a degree of its former glory with the reclaiming of it by Durin the Last. It's definitely one of those realms that I will be curious if we ever get to see in the Amazon Prime show. And again here, I want to remind you all to check out the links to Nat1 videos and Benji's hobbies in the description below. But now that we've reached the end of this video, it is time for me to ask you my question, and that is, which race do you prefer the architectural style of? The dwarves, the elves, the men of Rohan, of Gondor, of Harad, the hobbits, or any others at all? Please let me know your opinions and your reasons why in the comment section below. And now that we have reached the end of this video, I would also like to remind you all, we do not just have this channel, but two others as well. They are the 6th Ranger for Power Rangers content, and History of Dragon Ball for Dragon Ball content. Links for both of those channels will be in the description below if you would like to watch and support us over there as well. And now to shout out our patrons. Firstly, our Divine Power team members of Kevin, Michael, Abram, Matt, and Glorfindel of Gondolin. You are all awesome. And a big thanks to our Fire Demon tier members of Nashith, Lorenzo, Denver Steele, and Gregory. And as well, I cannot forget the Wizard Staff tier member of Andrew to go with them. You are all true legends of the Brohirrim. Finally, if you have not already as well, please do all that great stuff. Hit the like button on the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell icon as well for notifications. All these things will help us with that YouTube algorithm, which is something we need to get back in favor of. These little things do just make a massive difference to us. So, thank you once more if you have managed to reach the very end of this video with me, and we will see you next time on The Broken Sword.